This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Consult with a qualified professional before making any investment decisions.
Welcome to the Wire Weekly Roundup. The week in real estate presented in digestible bites. Hold on while our AI hosts take us on another ride through this week's top real estate headlines.
Welcome back to The Wire, everybody. Real estate enthusiasts and pros. You know, the drill. We're diving deep this week.
Into the heart of the real estate market, pulling insights from a whole pile of new reports.
Exactly. We're going to look at existing home sales for February.
Break down home ownership trends across different groups.
See how builder confidence is holding up.
And of course, check the pulse on those mortgage rates.
You ready to make sense of it all?
Let's go.
All right. Let's jump right into it. February's existing home sales. We saw a little bit of a rebound there, right? 4.2% increase from January.
Yeah, to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 4.26 million.
Okay, so after a bit of a slow start in January, that's got to feel like a good sign.
It definitely is. And you know what? It's actually the strongest monthly gain we've seen since August of last year.
Oh, wow.
So it does suggest that maybe things are starting to thaw out a bit as we head into spring.
Okay, so what's driving this increase?
Well, it seems like inventory is finally playing a role.
Yeah.
You know, Lawrence Yun, chief economist at NAR, he pointed out that having more homes on the market is giving buyers more choices, and that seems to be releasing some of that pent-up demand.
Okay. That makes sense. More options, less pressure to just jump on the first thing you see, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even with those mortgage rates holding relatively steady, having more inventory just seems to be making a difference.
So is this a sign that the market is finally turning a corner? Or is this February bump just a blip?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, while that monthly increase is encouraging, we do have to look at the bigger picture.
Right.
Year-over-year sales are still down 1.2% compared to February 2024.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, it's not all sunshine and roses just yet.
Yeah.
But Yun also made an interesting point about those raw sales figures.
Right.
You know, they were down 5.2% year over year.
Yeah, I saw that.
But he argued that when you factor in the leap year and the typical winter slowdown, the underlying momentum is actually looking a bit more positive than that raw number might suggest.
Okay. That's an important reminder to dig a little deeper.
Right. Exactly. You got to look beyond those headlines.
Absolutely. So speaking of digging deeper, what about inventory? Are we seeing more homes hitting the market?
We are. And this is where things start to get really interesting. Unsold existing home inventory, it jumped by 5.1% from January.
Okay, that's a pretty decent jump.
And a whopping 17% compared to last February.
Wow. Okay, so where are we at now?
We're sitting at 1.24 million units, which translates to about a 3.5-month supply.
All right, so that's giving buyers a little bit more breathing room than they've had in a while, I guess.
Exactly. And that's definitely a noticeable shift.
So with all this extra inventory, are homes flying off the shelves now?
Well, not exactly. The Realtors Confidence Index, you know, that survey of real estate agents, it tells us that properties are actually staying on the market a bit longer this time around.
Longer? How much longer?
Well, in February, the average was 42 days, up from 41 in January.
Okay.
And quite a bit longer than the 38 days we saw back in February of 2024.
Huh. So it sounds like buyers are being a bit more selective now that they have more options.
They are. They're taking their time, doing their due diligence.
Right. They're not feeling that same sense of urgency.
Exactly.
Now, one thing that really caught my eye was the increase in first-time home buyers. It was 31% of sales in February.
Oh, yeah. That's a significant jump from both January and last February.
That's got to be a good sign, right? I mean, it means more people are entering the market.
It is a positive sign, especially when you consider that 2024 had the lowest annual share of first-time buyers on record.
Oh, really? The lowest ever?
Yeah. So maybe this indicates that people who were priced out before or just couldn't find anything they liked are starting to see some opportunities.
Okay. But we got to see if that trend continues, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need more data to know for sure, but it's definitely something to watch.
For sure. What about cash buyers and investors? Are they still a major force in the market?
Well, cash sales did tick up a bit from January, accounting for 32% of transactions.
Okay.
But they're actually down compared to last year. Same goes for individual investors and second home buyers. They made up 16% of purchases, also down year over year.
Okay.
And distressed sales. There's still a tiny sliver of the market at just 3%.
So it sounds like the activity we're seeing is mostly coming from regular home buyers, not investors.
Yeah, that seems to be the case right now.
Now let's take a look at how different regions are performing, because it's never a uniform picture, is it?
Never. The real estate market is all about location, location, location.
True. So give us the regional rundown.
All right. In the Northeast, sales actually dipped a little from January to February, but they were up compared to last year.
Okay.
The Midwest was pretty stable month over month with a slight annual increase.
All right.
The South saw a big jump month over month, but is still down year over year.
Okay. And what about the West?
The West had the biggest monthly increase and was flat year over year.
Okay. So it really is a mixed bag out there.
It is. The market is definitely behaving differently depending on where you are.
All right. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Prices. Are they still going up?
Well, the median existing home sales price did continue its upward climb. It rose 3.8% year over year to hit $398,400.
Wow. 20 months in a row, right?
Yep. 20 consecutive months of increases.
Mm-hmm.
Single-family homes are averaging a bit higher at $420,500.
Okay.
While condo and co-op prices are coming in a bit lower at $355,100.
Okay.
But both of those segments saw an annual increase.
All right. But hold on a second. Didn't you say condo and co-op sales actually declined in February?
I did. It's an interesting contradiction, isn't it? Higher prices, but fewer sales.
Mm-hmm.
It's like something's not quite adding up.
Yeah. What's going on there?
Well, it could be a few things.
Yeah.
Maybe the increase in inventory we talked about is mostly concentrated in the single-family home market, so buyers have more options there.
Okay.
Or perhaps affordability concerns are hitting the condo market harder.
Mm.
Or it could be a shift in buyer preferences.
Yeah.
Maybe people are looking for more space now.
Right. A yard for the kids, maybe.
Exactly. We need more data to really pinpoint the cause. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Zillow Research, they've been crunching the numbers too, and they had some interesting observations. What's their take on all this?
Well, they pointed out that while February sales did beat their forecast, the combination of rising inventory and just modest sales increases suggests that buyers are still being pretty cautious.
Cautious. Why is that?
Well, they highlighted a few possible reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Some buyers might be waiting for prices to drop even further.
Okay. Makes sense.
Others might be struggling with those rising insurance costs we talked about.
Right.
And then there's the issue of saving for a down payment with those low savings rates.
Yeah, that's a big hurdle for a lot of people.
It is. So overall, it seems like buyers are being more deliberate and perhaps more financially constrained.
Okay, so what's Zillow's outlook for the rest of 2025? Are they predicting a big surge in sales?
Actually, they're anticipating a slower recovery than they initially thought. They believe those affordability challenges and the cautious buyer behavior are going to continue to shape the market.
Okay, so we might not see that rapid acceleration that some people were hoping for.
Probably not. It seems like a gradual recovery is more likely.
Okay, so that's a pretty comprehensive look at the existing home sales market. Now let's shift gears and talk about homeownership trends in general. The overall U.S. homeownership rate actually went up in 2023, which is great news.
It is. It climbed to 65.2%, reversing that little dip you saw in 2022.
Okay.
And what's really significant is that it's up from 63.5% back in 2013. So we have almost 12 million more homeowners now than we did a decade ago.
Wow, that's a huge increase.
It is. It shows that homeownership is still a goal for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Now, we also saw some interesting changes in homeownership rates among different racial and ethnic groups.
Black homeownership saw the biggest jump in 2023, increasing by 0.6 percentage points to 44.7%.
Okay. That's encouraging to see.
It is. It's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But even with that increase, the rate for Black homeowners is still trailing behind other groups.
Yeah, how does it compare?
Well, white homeownership is at 72.4%, Asian is at 63.4%, and Hispanic is at 51%.
So there's still a pretty significant gap there.
There is. And it raises some important questions about why that gap persists.
Absolutely. Now, it's worth noting that the Hispanic community has actually seen the biggest homeownership rate increase over the past decade.
They have. It's gone up by 5.8 percentage points since 2013.
Wow.
Followed by Asian Americans at 5.6 percentage points. White and Black homeownership rates also increased during that time, but at a slower pace.
Okay. So we're definitely seeing a shift in the demographics of homeownership.
We are. And it's going to be interesting to see how that continues to evolve.
But here's the thing that really surprised me. Despite these gains in homeownership among minority groups, the gap between Black and white homeownership has actually widened since 2013.
Yeah. That's a tough reality. It's like we're making progress, but it's not happening fast enough to close that gap.
And in some cases, the gap is actually getting bigger.
Exactly. And that really highlights the systemic challenges that still exist.
So even though we're seeing positive movement overall, those underlying issues haven't gone away.
They haven't. And it's going to take a concerted effort to address them.
Absolutely. Now, the report also pointed out that non-white home buyers are more likely to be first-time buyers.
They are 49% of Black, 43% of Asian, and 41% of Hispanic homebuyers were first-timers.
Wow. Compared to just 20% of white home buyers.
Yeah, so that reinforces the idea that we're seeing a demographic shift in the market.
Right, and these first-time buyers are going to be shaping the future of real estate.
They are. And it's important to understand their needs and challenges.
Now, unfortunately, it seems like the financial burdens of homeownership also fall disproportionately on certain groups.
That's true. Black homeowners face a higher housing cost burden in most states. They're spending over 30% of their income on housing.
Wow. That's a significant chunk of their budget.
It is. And it highlights those affordability challenges that we keep talking about.
And it's not just the mortgage payments, right? Insurance costs are a factor, too.
A big factor. The median homeowner's insurance cost in 2023 was actually highest for Black homeowners, followed by Asian, white, and then Hispanic homeowners. And these costs have been rising dramatically over the past decade, way faster than inflation.
Yeah, I've definitely heard people complaining about that.
And it's especially tough in places like Florida and Louisiana that are prone to natural disasters.
Right. Their insurance premiums are through the roof.
They are. So that adds another layer of financial strain for homeowners in those areas.
Absolutely. Now, access to credit is another hurdle that many people face.
And unfortunately, Black and Hispanic buyers tend to face more challenges in that area.
In what way?
Well, they often experience higher loan denial rates and maybe offer less favorable interest rates compared to white and Asian buyers.
Oh, wow. So even when they're trying to get into the market, the system can make it harder for them.
It can. And the fact that they often carry more student loan debt also makes it tougher to qualify for a mortgage.
So it's like a whole bunch of obstacles stacked against them.
It can feel that way.
Yeah.
And it's something we need to address as an industry.
Absolutely. Now, the report also highlighted the wide variation in home ownership rates at the state level.
Yeah, it's quite a range.
That's the spread.
For Black homeowners, it goes from a low of 10% in North Dakota all the way up to 58% in Mississippi.
Wow. That's a huge difference.
It is. And it just goes to show that local factors play a big role in homeownership trends.
Right. So we can't just look at the national numbers. We need to understand what's happening on the ground in different communities.
Exactly.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but let's shift our focus now to interest rates and builder sentiment as we head into the spring buying season. The Fed recently decided to hold interest rates steady. What are we expecting to see in the coming months?
Well, that decision by the Fed to hold rates was pretty much expected.
Right.
But they did signal that 2 rate cuts could be coming later this year.
Oh, interesting.
But that's all dependent on inflation continuing to cool down and the economy behaving as they expect.
Okay, so a lot of ifs there.
Definitely. But most experts believe that mortgage rates are likely to remain relatively stable for now.
Okay, that's good news for buyers.
It is. And there's even a chance we could see rates dip a little as we get deeper into spring.
Fingers crossed. So what about mortgage applications? Have we seen a surge in activity since rates have stabilized?
Not really. Mortgage applications for home purchases have been pretty flat recently.
Huh. So even with those steadier rates, buyers aren't exactly rushing to get into the market.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
And it probably comes back to those affordability concerns we talked about.
Right. High prices, insurance costs, those things are still weighing on people's minds.
They are. Even if rates aren't scaring people away, those other factors are still making them think twice.
All right, so what about the builders? How are they feeling as we enter what's typically the busiest time of year for home sales?
Well, builder confidence is looking cautiously optimistic. Housing starts actually exceeded expectations in February, which means builders are moving ahead with new projects.
Okay, that's a good sign.
It is, but there's still some uncertainty out there, particularly around potential new tariffs on building materials.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that.
It's a concern because it could drive up costs for builders and ultimately make homes even less affordable.
Right. So it's like a waiting game right now.
Kind of. Everyone's trying to see how things play out.
Now, are builders still offering incentives to attract buyers?
They are. The average price reduction they offered in February was about 5%, which is actually a little lower than last year.
Okay.
And almost 60% of builders said they were offering some kind of sales incentive.
Like what?
Oh, things like closing cost assistance or upgrades.
Right.
And about 25% of them were still cutting prices.
So it sounds like they're trying to stay competitive and address those affordability concerns?
They are. They know that buyers have options and they need to make their homes attractive.
Makes sense. So on the new construction side, are we seeing more homes hitting the market?
We are. New listings for newly built homes saw their biggest year-over-year increase in 6 weeks.
Okay. So that's good news for anyone looking at new construction.
It is. More inventory means more choices and hopefully less upward pressure on prices.
Now, Redfin has been tracking buyer demand and pending sales. What are they seeing?
Well, their data shows that early-stage home buyer demand is picking up. Their home buyer demand index is at its highest point since mid-December.
Oh, so more people are starting to express interest.
They are, but here's the catch. Despite that increased interest, pending sales are still down year over year.
So people are looking but not necessarily buying.
That's it, in a nutshell. And it seems like those high housing costs are still a major roadblock for a lot of people.
Right. They might be interested, but they can't quite make the numbers work.
Exactly.
And overall, home prices are still on the rise, aren't they?
They are. The median sale price is up 3.3% compared to last year.
Wow.
And that means the median monthly mortgage payment is still pretty steep for a lot of households.
Yeah, it's tough out there, especially for first-time buyers.
It is, but there are some signs that the market might be shifting in certain parts of the country.
Oh, how so?
Well, home price growth slowed down in February to its slowest pace since July 2024. And the annual growth rate has been declining for 10 months straight.
So things are cooling off a bit.
They are. And what's really interesting is that some markets, like parts of Florida and Texas, are actually seeing prices drop year over year.
Oh, wow. So those markets are becoming more buyer-friendly.
They are. It's a significant shift from what we've seen over the past couple of years.
All right, so taking all of this into account, what's the key takeaway for our listeners, especially those in the real estate industry?
Well, for the real estate pros out there, the market is in a very interesting place right now. We've got some positive signals like increased sales and inventory, but we're also still dealing with those affordability issues and cautious buyers. So it's this delicate balancing act.
Right.
And the fact that we're seeing such variation across different demographics and regions, it just emphasizes the importance of understanding your local market.
Absolutely. You can't just rely on national trends.
No. You got to know what's happening in your own backyard.
Yeah. And what about our listeners who are more on the enthusiast side? Maybe thinking about buying or selling a home. What should they keep in mind?
Well, for those folks, the good news is there's more inventory out there, so you'll have more options to choose from.
Okay.
But don't expect those high prices and insurance costs to disappear overnight.
Right.
So do your research, understand the dynamics of your local market, and be aware of the challenges and opportunities that different buyer segments are facing.
So it's all about being informed and strategic.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up here, it feels like we're in this kind of complex dance right now. Rising inventory, meeting hesitant demand, modest gains in homeownership alongside those persistent equity gaps, and the potential for stable mortgage rates, but also a lot of economic uncertainty.
It's a multi-layered market for sure, and it's going to take a lot of careful analysis to navigate it effectively.
All right, so we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought.
Right.
What stands out to you most from all this information?
Yeah. What questions are coming up for you as you consider these trends?
These are the kinds of conversations we need to be having.
Exactly. Let's dig deeper, think critically, and really understand the implications of these market shifts.
This is just the beginning of the conversation, and we'll keep exploring these topics in future episodes.
So stay tuned to The Wire for more in-depth analysis.
And here's a final thought to ponder. Given that persistent and widening black-white homeownership gap, what kind of innovative solutions can we come up with to address this fundamental inequality?
It's a challenge, but it's one we need to tackle head-on.
We'll catch you next time on The Wire. See you then.
If you're interested in your own personalized edition of The Wire, please visit us at thewire.fm/custom. We offer market-specific podcasts with all the latest real estate news and market analysis delivered to you weekly or monthly. Own your market with a personalized edition of The Wire, the week in real estate. Thank you for listening.